Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Bible study. We are doing Numbers. We're going to get through all of Numbers today. Some of 34, some actually of 33, and then on to 36, which is the last chapter in Numbers. So let's take a quick look. Some of this stuff we went over last week, so I'm just going to reiterate some of it. But there are several points to be made fairly quickly. Okay, so at the end of 33, beginning of verse 50, God is, through Moses, Moses is under sentence of death for what he did at the, what was it? I'm trying to think.
The rock.
The water.
Yeah, the rock. He messed up. Okay, so God says now you're not going to get into the promised land. You're going to die. Okay, but before you die, I've got one more thing for you. I've got one more. It's like me in retirement. The DS comes up. Hey, Dennis, could you take this church? You know, that kind of thing. So anyway, before I die, I don't know what churches I'm going to have, but here we go. But the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites. Say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you." Now this is interesting. It said, instead of killing all the inhabitants, you'll drive them out. Okay? We really don't care where they go, but we're going to drive them out. Okay? Destroy all their figured stones, destroy all their cast images, demolish all their high places. You shall take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have given you the land to possess. You shall apportion the land by lot according to your clans, a large one to a large one. You shall give a large inheritance to a small one. You give a small inheritance. The inheritance shall belong to the person on whom the lot falls, according to your ancestral tribes. You shall apportion it, but if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, see, you might not, then those whom you let remain shall be as barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They shall trouble you in the land where you are settling, and I will do to you as I thought to do to them. So if you don't drive them out, I'm going to drive you out. Okay? Now, who's writing this? People in exile. They've been driven out. And why? Because they were commiserating with all the folks that they let stay in the land. Okay? So this is a this is a prophecy in reverse. I'll tell you why you got driven out of your land. This is it. Okay, just kind of think of that. Okay, then chapter 34 sets the boundaries of the land, and you see what the promised land consists of. These boundaries. It's hard for us to determine, exactly what this is. They are not the same boundaries that God promised to Moses, which was all the way from the Euphrates down to the Red Sea. Okay? This stops short. It's short by Syria. It doesn't go into Iraq. So it's a smaller country than what was promised to Moses. Okay? But this is maybe a reflection of the practicality of their trying to conquer all of that land and not being able to do it. Some of those northern, they had real problems militarily with several populations. The Philistines were one. The Philistines were actually from like up in the Greek islands. Very advanced culture, great in metallurgy, wonderful weapons. They occupied the high ground right near the Mediterranean. Then you've got the Assyrians and the Hittites to the north. I mean, you don't mess with them. You just don't. So what we see in these boundaries that are listed in chapter 34 are much reduced from exactly what Moses was promised. Okay. They represent the boundaries of the northern and southern kingdoms as they were consolidated under David and Solomon. I think the biggest expansion territorially probably happened under Solomon. Solomon was much more adept at throwing his weight around. He really had a strong military. Nobody messed with Solomon. And so a lot of countries wanted to have treaties with him. Lebanon had treaties with Solomon, very strong, so that, he got his wood for the temple and the palace from Lebanon. He had a great working relationship with them. He had a great relationship really with the Philistine-type people. He was able to expand more by treaty and by military strength, so that it was worthwhile to make a deal with Solomon, okay? And he got very wealthy from it. Solomon discovered what I wish a lot of countries would discover, is that you can get richer through commerce than you can through war. So, hey, how you doing? All right, we got more folks coming in. All right, so I'm not, huh?
I said good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Bring it. Okay. Chapter 34 basically, like I said, sets the boundaries, and it also names the head of the tribes that are going to be occupying the land. So I'm not going to go into any depth on that. Chapter 35 is something that we were discussing last week, the cities of the Levites. Okay? And this is in the plains of Moab by the Jordan opposite Jericho. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the Israelites to give the inheritance that they possess towns for the Levites to live in. You shall also give the Levites pasture land surrounding the town. The town shall be theirs to live in, and their pasture land shall be for their cattle, for their livestock, and for all their animals. The pasture land of the town which you shall give to the Levites shall reach from the wall of the town outward 1,000 cubits." So that's like 3,000 feet. Generously, 3,000 feet out from the wall of the city. All around, you shall measure outside the town for the east 2,000 cubits, for the south side 2,000 cubits, for the west side 2,000 cubits, for the north side 2,000 cubits. With the town in the middle, this shall belong to them as a pasture land for their town. That's not a lot of land for pasture. Okay? They did not expect the Levites to have massive flocks. They expected the Levites to have almost subsistence because of the allocations of sacrifice that went to the priests and the Levites. So they weren't in the sheep raising, cattle raising business. They just had enough land to keep on hand the animals that they were about to consume. Okay. The towns that you give to the Levites shall include 6 cities of refuge where you shall permit a slayer to flee, and in addition to them you shall give 42 towns. The towns that you give to the Levites shall total 48 with their pasture lands, and as for the towns that you give for the possession of the Israelites, for the larger tribes you shall take many, from the smaller tribes you shall take few. In proportion to the inheritance that it obtains shall give of its towns to the Levites. So if you've got a small allocation for your tribe, you don't have to give as many towns to the Levites, but if you've got a big allocation, then you're going to have more Levites in your territory. That's basically what he's saying. It's a, what do you call it? Graduated tax. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites, say to them, when you cross the Jordan land of Canaan, then you shall select cities to be cities of refuge, so that a slayer who kills a person without intent may flee." All right, so if you killed somebody inadvertently, or let's say you got into an altercation, all of a sudden you didn't have any intent to kill this person, but let's say the person attacked you and you killed them, self-defense, okay? Then it's a homicide, but it's a self-defense homicide. It's got to be determined in a court. You have an option for a court. But then somebody has to determine whether or not it was a manslaughter or a murder before you ever got to the city of refuge. Okay? But if you committed manslaughter or killed in self-defense, the aggrieved family could assign an avenger to come and kill you. And it would be okay as long as it was outside a city of refuge. So, I mean, there's a lot of injustice in the justice, okay? So we talked about what constitutes a murder. Anyone who strikes another with an iron object and death ensues as a murderer, the murderer shall be put to death. Or anyone who strikes another with a stone in hand that could cause death and death ensues as a murderer shall be put to death. So if you used a weapon of some sort, then that's not considered manslaughter, that's considered murder, even if it's in self-defense. The avenger of blood is the one who shall put the murderer to death. When they meet, the avenger of blood shall execute the sentence. Likewise, if someone pushes another from hatred or hurls something at another, lying in wait, and death ensues, or in enmity strikes another with the hand and death ensues, then the one who struck the blow shall be put to death. The person is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when they meet. Okay, it does not provide for the murderer to defend himself against the avenger. That would be what? An additional charge. Okay. But if someone pushes another suddenly without enmity or hurls an object lying in wait or while handling any stone that could cause death unintentionally, drops it on another and death ensues, could happen, though they were not enemies and no harm was intended, then the congregation shall judge. This is not the Levites. Okay, local tribe, out by the town gate, elders get together and they make a decision. Okay? Then the congregation shall judge between the slayer and the avenger of blood in accordance with these ordinances. So there is the avenger of blood is like the prosecutor in these local arrangements. Okay? This model, by the way, is very, very much akin to Sharia law as it's practiced today. The elders make a determination whether or not there's a person has violated Sharia law. You know,
Sharia law, is that?
that's Islamic law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did they draw it from this?
Oh yeah, because Islam derived from our Old Testament. And there is a provision Muhammad put in there that you have some respect for Jews and for Christians because we are all people of the book. And this is the book. The Old Testament is the book. Okay, so it's a source document that's been used in all three faiths. Okay, whether or not that is practiced in any way today for infidels is debatable. Okay. Okay, then the congregation shall judge between the slayer and the avenger of blood in accordance with these ordinances, and the congregation shall rescue the slayer from the avenger of blood. Then the congregation shall send the slayer back to the original city of refuge. This is crazy because you would think, okay, what they're implying here is that a person gets to a city of refuge, is dragged back to the local town for a judgment by the local community, and then if they are acquitted, they have to go back to the city of refuge until the high priest dies.
Why?
I don't know. I can't know everything. I don't know. I don't know why that is. Okay, I guess just so that so there isn't the temptation to be a vigilante against the guy. The city of refuge, the guy will be protected, you know? Anyway. But on the other hand, there are references to the Levites are the ones who make the determination about whether or not a person is guilty or innocent. So you got two different things going on here that kind of contradict each other. Person goes to a city of refuge and there's a trial in the city of refuge, okay? But in this case, he goes to the city of refuge, is dragged back to the local community, can't kill him. They have a trial, and if the guy's acquitted, he has to go back to the city of refuge. Go figure. Okay. The slayer shall live in it until the death of the high priest who is anointed with the holy oil. But if the slayer shall at any time go outside the bounds of the original city of refuge and is found by the avenger of blood, the bounds of the city of refuge, and is killed by the avenger, no blood guilt shall be incurred. For the slayer must remain in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest, but after the death of the high priest, the slayer must return to his property. Whoop-de-doo. You know? These things shall be a statute and ordinance for you throughout your generations, wherever you live. You better hope that the high priest is an old guy. Okay. So, if anyone kills another, the murderer shall be put to death on the evidence of witnesses, but no one shall be put to death on the testimony of a single witness. Okay? And women witnesses don't count. Moreover, you shall accept no ransom for the life of a murderer who is subject to the death penalty. A murderer must be put to death, so you can't bail him out. Okay? You shall accept no ransom. You can't accept ransom for a person who's fled to a city of refuge, enable the fugitive to return and live in the land before the death of the high priest. So you can't bail a person out of the city of refuge either. Okay? You shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and no expiation can be made for the land for the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of the one who shed it. And as we discussed last week, whenever somebody tells you that Judaism does not sanction human sacrifice, that's wrong. Because the land is polluted, and by the blood of somebody who's killed, and the only way you can clean up the land is by the blood of the person who shed it. Okay? So there is a sacrificial component to this. Also, whenever a population is attacked in the conquest of Canaan, if it's a holy war, then all the population of your enemy is dedicated to God, which means that they are supposed to be killed. Okay, and we've had a number of incidences, of course, during the Exodus, where they did not kill everybody, and there was blood guilt on the people of Israel. They were attacked with plagues. The Levites went out and slew a whole bunch of the population as all of this, until they killed everybody that they were supposed to kill. And then that constituted a sacrifice to the Lord. And if you didn't sacrifice them to the Lord, there was blood guilt on you for doing it. So to say that they did not sanction human sacrifice is just a misnomer. Now, can you relate that to the context of the crucifixion? That would take some discussion and debate. Okay? But to say flat out that it was not part of the law or part of their heritage that human sacrifice was not allowed, you can't just use the example of Abraham and Isaac. You just can't do it.
Like the people that whenever you were, you had to stay in the city of refuge, what could that person do there? Could they work?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, they were.
Yeah, they were free.
Okay.
They were free. But they had to basically forfeit whatever livelihood they had back in the other place, their family. I don't know if a family could join them in the city of refuge. I don't know if that was allowed. So there's no provision in here for it. But there's no provision against it either. So, okay. The last chapter of Numbers goes out with a whimper, not a bang. Marriage of female heirs. Okay. In the previous chapter, they were talking about, in this one particular tribe, the tribal head did not have any male heirs. He had several daughters, but he had no male heirs. And the question was, can the female daughters inherit the property of their father? Can women be property owners based on an inheritance? And the determination was, yes, they can. Okay, it just went that far. But there was a problem. There's always, every time you pass a law, that you gotta have a technicality, some fine print. What's going on? Well, here's the difficulty. In chapter 36, the difficulty is this. If a woman is inherited property and she marries, then that property belongs to her husband. Okay? What if she marries outside of her tribe? Well, if she marries outside of her tribe, then the property that the husband inherits becomes the tribal property of the other tribe. And that's not the way the land was supposed to be divvied up. So you can't
Marry outside.
You can't marry outside the tribe, okay? Now genetically, this is a very poor policy, okay? So the way this works, and chapter 36 goes through this. The heads of the ancestral houses, the clans of the descendants of Gilead and Mashir, son of Manasseh of the Josephite clan, came forward and spoke in the presence of Moses and the leaders of the heads of the ancestral houses, da-da-da-da. They said, the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land for inheritance by lot to Israelites, and my Lord was commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance to our brother Zelophehad to his daughters. But if they are married to another Israelite tribe, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our ancestors and added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So it will be taken away from the allotted portion of our inheritance, and when the Jubilee of the Israelites comes, then the inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they married, and their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our ancestral tribes. So, okay, now Van, you were talking about the restrictive clause in Methodism. There's a restrictive clause here, okay? There's a tribal restrictive clause. Okay? And it governs who you can marry. Then Moses commanded the Israelites, according to the word of the Lord, saying, the descendants of the tribe of Joseph are right in what they are saying. This is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry whom they think best. That's odd. Okay. Only it must be into the clan of their father's tribe. Well, there was no governing male to determine who they should marry. So these women are free to marry whoever they want. There's
In
an
their
odd
tribe.
thing. Yeah, in their tribe. Okay. Only must be into the clan of their father's tribe that they are married. So no inheritance of the Israelites shall be transferred from one tribe to another. For all Israelites shall retain the inheritance of their ancestral tribes. Every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the Israelites shall marry one from the clan of her father's tribe, so that all Israelites may continue to possess their ancestral inheritance. No inheritance shall be transferred from one tribe to another, for each of the tribes of Israel shall retain its own inheritance. The daughters of Zelophehad did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad, married the sons of their father's brothers, their cousins. They were married into the clans of the descendants of Manasseh, son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of their father's clan. So they married cousins.
Okay. They married cousins,
Yeah.
and what would they do with the babies that were born deformed because, or mentally not right? Because if they're marrying that close into.
Do you think that might happen?
That might happen.
Yep. I don't know. There is not something in the law of Moses that governs deformed babies.
What happened if they didn't marry within their, or they just didn't, they couldn't? Or
They would retain the inheritance, and whoever was the closest male heir would get the property.
so it happened, they married outside their tribe.
Well, then they might declare that that marriage was null and void. That could be.
Tribes interact.
Yes, they do. Sometimes well, very often not so well. There were land disputes, there were border disputes, there were internecine fighting going on between the tribes. Okay, this is one of the big problems when during the time of judges, people did whatever they wanted. Okay? And so there were a lot of these competitions among tribes. If you take a look at, like, for instance, the debate on Deborah as a judge, and the relationship between Deborah's tribes and other tribes that she was trying to ally with in order to take out, I think, the Midianites, then you see that there's a lot of competition between them. Who's going to get credit for it? How are you going to divide the spoils? There was a lot of this interesting stuff going on. It was hard to form an alliance among the tribes for any local dispute that a tribe might have with an external enemy. Okay? So that was a problem.
And we wonder why countries can't get along
Yeah,
today.
really.
Oh, they've never gotten along. Don't expect it,
Even the
okay?
tribes.
Yeah. So, that was one of the reasons why the people wanted a king. Because the judges thing was, the time of the judges was a little bit akin to what the United States was like under the Articles of Confederation, where each state was sovereign. So sovereign that in order to do something like for an Indian war or something like that, you had to ally yourself with a neighboring state in order to get something done. The federal government didn't have the ability to tax or to raise an army on its own. There were a lot of, each state was so sovereign that the federal government was incredibly weak. And it just wasn't working. You couldn't do a foreign treaty, for instance. You couldn't get international loans. There were all kinds of things that were just making it terribly dysfunctional for this country to exist under the Articles of Confederation. So we finally became a constitutional republic. And then with that strength, then this nation started to gain much more respect internationally. You could, the federal government could decree that there was a national emergency to respond to and that sort of thing. Under the judges, it was like that. It was under Confederation. So if you want to look at dysfunctional, okay, right now the European Union is essentially a confederation. And you see what kind of problems they're running into. So, I mean, they've tried to join all these states into a central thing, but these states are so sovereign that it's really a confederation and not a republic. So when they wanted a king, and Saul was pretty good at the southern tribes, not so good at getting the northern tribes in. David was really good. By hook or by crook, he got the northern tribes to unite with the southern tribes and made a nation. Okay? And there were a lot of friction. David, he was sovereign, but he really was a weak sovereign. And then Solomon came in. He was a very strong sovereign, but then, like most central governments do, he overstepped his bounds. He denied the independence of the tribes and showed favoritism. Nobody was equal under the law in Solomon's time. And under his kid, who was an idiot, the northern tribes rebelled and broke off from the southern tribes. And everything became weaker after that. They went back down. Huh?
Who was his kid?
Oh, gosh. I can't recall the name offhand. I'm getting to that point. But he was an idiot. Solomon's son took over, and the people came to him and said, Solomon's taxes are really pretty hard. Could you back off a little bit? And the kid said, oh, no. He said, I'm going to double the taxes. And that's all she wrote, man. Most revolutions revolve around taxes, one way or another. They just do.
The bottom line.
Yeah, bottom line.
So over there now, in Iraq, Iran, like the Houthis and the Hamas, are they tribes or are they just renegades?
They are religious factions.
But they're not really tribes as,
Yeah, some of them. Yes, I would say that they are akin to tribes in many ways, but there is an overarching philosophical religious unity to them. They are driven by Shia overlords in Iran. Some of the, like Hamas, there's a lot of Hamas that is Sunni, but they're getting their money from Iran, so Iran's really calling the shots. We ran into this in Iraq, in Operation Iraqi Freedom, where the Shia that we were running into in Iraq, and they represent the majority population in Iraq, would not unite with the Sunni in Iraq. But if the Sunni sections were able to get some funding from Iran, then who knows, they might switch side and join against us. This is kind of what's going on. It's a very complex thing, but if you follow the money, it's very unified. It's very unified. It all comes from Iran, and it's all driven by the Shia desire to create a chaotic situation which will bring back their favorite imam. So it's an apocalyptic type of thing. And God knows if they get a hold of a nuclear weapon, of all the people in the world who are likely to use a nuclear weapon, they will do it.
That they will be obliterated.
That doesn't matter. Understand that does not matter. Because their objective is not to survive, their objective is to bring back the imam. It is a death cult. It is a death cult.
And what is the imam?
It goes way back a couple of generations from Muhammad. There was a dispute on, whether Ali was supposed to be the inheritor of Muhammad.
So he was before Muhammad?
No. He was after. He was, like a grandson or
Is he
something.
supposed to be like Jesus coming back?
In many respects, yes. It's a world governance. Everything comes under Islam kind of thing.
Before.
Huh?
I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
Oh, you need to study up because that's what they're going to do.
Well, I haven't studied a whole lot of
Yeah.
Islam.
Well, Jefferson had to do it, and that's why we went to war with Tripoli. But yeah,
I would recommend, if you don't want to sleep at night, watch the documentary Turning Point.
Mhm.
So now-
It is unbelievable
Yeah.
what has gone on and what is going on.
Yes. But I mean, it is.
Netflix.
Yeah, it is basic. There are Christians who think that if they can create a chaotic situation, that Christ will return. Okay, they're way off on the fringes of Christianity. Okay, but for instance, there are evangelicals who think that if they can get the temple rebuilt, they want the Jews to rebuild the temple because that's one of the criteria before Christ comes back. So they want Christ to come back, so they're going to build the temple with the understanding that that's going to create a horrible war because they're going to have to destroy the Dome of the Rock Mosque to do it. So you're going to have a big war going on between Islam and the West. Israel as a focal, and then out of that chaos, out of the book of Revelation kind of stuff, then ultimately Christ comes back and we have a one world government under Christ and everything is cool. Okay? Think of this from the standpoint of Iran. They don't care if there's a war. They don't care if there's annihilation. The whole thing is to bring back the imam and a one world government and everything under Sharia law. So and they'll blow things up to do it, which is what they're doing. Okay?
Was the imam, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Was he an actual person,
I'm not sure. I have to look into that.
not like Jesus?
I think he was an actual person. Yeah, but it's a resurrected kind of person.
Solomon's son's name was Rehoboam.
Rehoboam, that's him. Yep. Rehoboam. Okay.
But this is not what Jesus would want.
Oh, no. No, he said there would be these events before he came back, and all of those events have happened.
Right.
Okay? So, I mean, what he's saying is the return of Christ is during the normal course of events in
Right.
geological and human history.
Right.
There's nothing,
Nothing different.
nothing terribly unusual. And, you know, people say, well, we're living in the last days because of this going. No,
We've always lived in the last.
we've always lived in the last days. Every day is the last day. I mean, talk to any Nazarene evangelist that I know. You know?
No, I mean, seriously.
But I mean, that's the, you know, he just said it's going to be a common time. You're going to see everything going on like you're seeing going on right now. And it, you know, could happen. So, no special occasions. Anyway, let's take a look at Deuteronomy. I'm going to give you a quick and dirty overview, and you decide what you want to do.
You won't be here next week.
I will
right?
not be here next week, right. So you've got some time to mull this over. But Deuteronomy is a little bit different from the rest of the Pentateuch. Deuteronomy does not derive from the same period as the previous 4 books. In other words, it wasn't necessarily edited during the time of the exile. Deuteronomy derives from them discovering ancient scrolls in the temple under Josiah's reform. So what Deuteronomy does is it's a more practical book because it not only reiterates all the laws that we've been going through in the previous books, but it gives a practical guide on how to administer them, how to set up a government, how to, you know, manage the society. So Deuteronomy is more functional than a lot of this. What you have here is, okay, these are the laws, but not necessarily how do you administer them. And Deuteronomy goes into the administration of the law. So there's a lot of reiteration of what we've gone over already. You don't get into the conquest of the promised land under Deuteronomy. Okay? You get how to set up the promised land once you've conquered it under Deuteronomy. And so what you have is probably a book that was written, the original source material for Deuteronomy is probably much later and much more institutional. It probably comes more from established government than, you know, the previous books.
Would it be a little truer historical explanation, since it was kind of looking back?
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so. It presents some of the original laws in a little bit different context. The Ten Commandments are reiterated in Deuteronomy. So I don't know if you want to go through the book. It's a good book. Okay, I've taught Deuteronomy, so I mean we can do that, or we can jump right into Joshua, which is the conquest of the land. It's more action figures in Joshua than you got in Deuteronomy. But again,
Deuteronomy is part of the, what was it the 5 books called?
The Pentateuch. Yeah.
Okay, so it's part of the established part that Israel judges as the.
Yes, it is. It is a source document.
The first 5 books are the most important in the Bible.
Yes, and this last verse in chapter 36, these are the commandments and the ordinances that the Lord commanded through Moses to the Israelites in the plains of Moab by the Jordan opposite Jericho. Okay, you have a similar statement in Leviticus, and you have one in Deuteronomy. So when it says that, then this is law.
So be it.
Yeah.
But
It's a
Deuteronomy
mutable law.
doesn't say that.
So is that why it's contributed to Moses writing it?
Yeah. Yeah, as far as the tradition is that this is a Mosaic origin.
Is that what the Jews?
Yes. Yeah, but it's almost like when a pope says something ex cathedra, it becomes the law of the Roman Catholic Church. It becomes the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church, regardless of scripture or tradition or anything else. Okay? So I look at the Pentateuch in much the same way that I look at papal pronouncements. That it says it's the law of Moses, therefore that's what it is. But as we've gone through it, we've wondered from time to time whether this was the law of God or the law of Moses.
What, is there an explanation of the term Deuteronomy?
Deuteronomy is, it's actually a Greek term, and it comes from the Septuagint translation of the Bible, which is a Greek translation. It came out after Alexander's time. So the name of the book it's a Greek origin, but it means law.
I say, let's do it.
You want to do Deuteronomy?
I like Deuteronomy.
Finish it up, yeah.
Well,
I'd like to do the first 5 books.
Okay. I'll give you a hint. I mean, somebody like to look at the last page of the book before you read it, okay? Moses actually dies in Deuteronomy. Doesn't die in Numbers.
Well, you've already killed the Indian.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you know. But he was under sentence of death anyway, it's just, you know. Okay,
How long did he live while he was under sentence of death?
I don't know.
Okay.
Long enough to get another appointment, I can say that.
He was an old guy, you know, he may be ready to die.
Okay, so we'll be picking this up in July, and God bless you all. Thanks for bearing with me through what we've gone through. So, come back and see me in July. That would be a good thing. Okay, God bless you all.
I was hoping, was it Mildred? Was that her name?
Yeah.